It's an absolutely wild day in the world of Magic the Gathering. On the bad side of things, we have the Magic Netflix show cancellation. It is official. On the good side of things, we have another Ghostbusters secret layer. This one is based on the old cartoon, and it is fantastic.
Magic. I am a wizard. History. I'm an old wizard. The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because I am in great spirits and we are here for another epic installment of Mega Magic News. We've got some big stuff to talk about, but before we do that, want to let you know something else I am excited about. Me and my lovely lady have just started a series of movie reviews, and we have started out with 3 horror movies, including the abysmal movie Longlegs. If you haven't seen it, don't. So, that video just came out today. It is available over on my other channel. I am going to leave a link to it down in the pinned comment below. So after this, if you want to go and check it out, we can have some more fun together. Now, let's dive in to talking about the magic news. We're going to do the Netflix stuff first, and then we'll move into the fun time of the Ghostbusters secret layer. I had no idea how much I was going to love Ghostbusters secret layer, but they are grabbing the guitar of my nostalgia and going like it's awesome. Anyways, let's get the bad news out of the way first. So ding dong, the witch is dead. The witch being the Netflix magic series. Now this thing had been struggling for a while. It was initially announced, if I'm not mistaken, all the way back in 2019, and they went through a number of different people working on it, including the Russo brothers, right? So the Russo brothers at one point were the executive producers on it, and for me, seeing names like that attached to it, I had mixed feelings about the show as a concept. Part of me was like, Wizards of the Coast doesn't have the greatest track record in recent times with their stories. But on the other hand, they have, in some circumstances, with people like Brandon Sanderson, given the writers of the story a lot of leeway where they can just kind of do whatever they want. So if the story was set in the world of Magic the Gathering, but the people in charge of it were allowed to make whatever they wanted, there was genuine potential. If there was too much corporate meddling, then it would most likely end up being not that great a product. But ultimately what happened is they just kept going through different people working on it. I don't even think the Russo brothers were the first ones who were brought on to work on it. So I think they were brought in after other people. Then they left and Jeff Klein took over. So at a certain point, the whole project just fell apart. Now, it's not exactly clear where it fell apart, but they were way down the road because the way we found out about this is very strange. Normally, you find out about these cancellations being just trumpeted out. Sorry, we're discontinuing this show. We're not going to be making this show, all of it, right? But Netflix just axed a whole bunch of shows in one go because Netflix basically, they did a lot of overreaching. Originally, they started out as a service where they would mail you DVDs. Like, you would literally get DVDs mailed to you by them, and then you could mail them back. It seems so archaic to think about those old days, but that's how Netflix started. And then they went and they got all these different companies to agree to let them broadcast their shows for a share of like the profits or whatever. And Netflix did such a good job of that they ended up having all these other networks go, no, we want our shows back. We're going to try and emulate your model. So Netflix had to turn around and start trying to create new properties for themselves, right? And that led them to trying to make movies, TV shows, and whatever. But a lot of them flopped because Netflix wasn't discerning enough or didn't really know what they were doing. So they just went, we're going to chop a bunch of shows. And Magic the Gathering happened to be one of them. No official announcement from Netflix, but in a recent interview, the person who was slated to play Gideon Jura in the actual show, he was basically doing an interview for a brand new movie that was coming out. And they were like, hey, so about that Magic Netflix show. And he was like, wait, What? I thought everybody knew that thing was done. Like, you're asking me about this now? This is old news. Like, the actor was genuinely confused as to why it was being brought up. He's just like, that show was supposed to come out in 2022. That was the initial release that they were supposed to give it. And guess what? They already had the whole show written out, and all the voice actors had recorded their lines and everything. So a lot of the show was done. I don't know how much of the animation was done, because I presume if the animation was complete, why would not Netflix not put Notflix? That's what they should be called. Now that they cancel everything, Notflix. Anyways, why would Notflix not put it out if it was already completed? But yeah, the entire story had been written. All of the voice line acting had been done. It was supposed to feature planeswalkers like Gideon, Jace, Chandra, but they weren't supposed to be the main focus of the show originally. It was going to be some new people, and Wizards had big plans for this. They even told us when they were making this show that, like, look, the TV show is not going to follow along with what's going on in the cards. So if we're going to, let's say, Duskmourn, for example, the show would not have gone to Duskmourn. But they said it could work in reverse, where if the show is popular and people like it, you could actually see elements of the show making it into the cards. So, like I said, I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to turn out that great. But now we'll never get to know, because apparently the project's been dead for like 2 years now. And I found out when looking into this, and I had no idea, there was apparently a plan for a Magic the Gathering movie that got scrapped as well. But that wasn't being done by Netflix. That was being done by 20th Century Fox, right? So they were originally making a Magic the Gathering movie, but in, I think it was 2019, according to the notes I have here, that where the whole thing was just scrapped and canceled when Disney bought 20th Century Fox. And it's pretty aggravating to live in a world where we have a movie based on Battleship, one of Hasbro's properties, but we don't have a movie based on Magic the Gathering. And if you're wondering why it took until 2019 for them to even have a Magic the Gathering movie in the work, it's because Wizards of the Coast was allowed to have D&D movies made way back in the day. And not like the new one that actually was pretty entertaining. Like it definitely had a few flaws, but overall the new D&D movie was a lot of fun. The old D&D movie had like one of the Wayans brothers in it, and it was not very good, but it did have Jeremy Irons hamming it up hardcore. Like that. He's so memorable in that. So overall, the D&D movie stuff did so abysmally. Like, think about that. You're Hasbro. Your D&D movies do so bad that it's like, okay. Like, we could use this Magic the Gathering property where we have these giant expansive multiverse with all these different worlds and stories that could be told. The original Brothers War, all kinds of different options. And they went, Wizards of the Coast and their properties get adapted so poorly that why don't we do that game Battleship where you just go boom, boom, oh, you sunk my battleship, and we'll just throw aliens that live in the water and can fight naval battles into it. Like, it's still, to this day, blows my mind that Battleship got an adaptation before Magic the Gathering did. So, ultimately, I feel like this Netflix show is a loss for us, right? Like, even if it turned out to be not the greatest, it would expand the overall lore of Magic the Gathering. And I'll let you know a little secret. I'm a big fan of pretty much everything to do with Magic the Gathering, especially the story, the flavor. Like, I'm one of the people who goes on Arena, and the little blurbs that they put up between games that tell you about, like, different elements of the world, I read every single one of those. I pay attention to the art differences in cards on Arena, like when they had the Jace with the crazy snake and tentacles come out of his back, and it's like, that's the Phyrexianized art. And that's what made it obvious that Thunder Junction had completely taken ideas from the whole Phyrexia all will be one concept and reskinned them into Thunder Junctitude, right? So ultimately for me, I would have liked to have had this show. And it's a shame that it really just comes down to Netflix, like their budgetary concerns, that's what destroyed the project, not that there was a lack of interest. Because apparently, according to the guy who worked on the show, it was supposed to be pretty good, right? And the fact they got far enough down the line that all the voice actors, I would like to find out one day what the actual story was going to be, and then I can determine just how disappointed I am that it's not around, right? So we've got the Netflix show cancellation. We talked about the movie. So now let's turn to talking about Ghostbusters, okay? And yes, I recognize in the last Ghostbuster video that I did, I totally forgot to mention Winston. My bad. Winston is a fantastic character, and I'll actually get more into that when we look at the cards as well. But ultimately, that was a big oversight on my part, so my apologies. But as I said earlier in the video, I am actually really vibing on this Ghostbuster concept. The first secret layer that we got, if you haven't seen that video yet, it's the previous video to this one, and that's where we go over the Ghostbusters one that is based on the 80s movie where you've got Bill Murray, you've got Aykroyd, like all those individuals, right? Ernie's in there. See, I mentioned Winston, it's okay. So this one that we're going to look at today is based on the real Ghostbusters animated series. So that's the cartoon that ran from, I believe it was 1986 to 91, and it started off pretty strong. And then ultimately what happened was a whole bunch of corporate meddling where they came in and said, okay, we need to change this, this, and this. And it really just kind of slid downwards all the way to the point where they essentially rebranded the show near the end of its run. 5 years actually is pretty good for a cartoon. And I have a lot of nostalgic memories of the old days watching this kind of stuff on TV, along with the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If they ever do a secret lair for the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm going to lose my mind. That and Legend of Zelda are my top two god tier picks for secret lairs. But anyways, let's go and look at this Ghostbuster goodness, because you know what? Busting out new cards makes me feel good. We're starting out with Careful Study, and this one references a pretty fun moment in the show. So, 1 blue for a sorcery, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. The flavor text says, so as nearly as I can tell, when Slimer touched the machine, his ectoplasm shorted out a circuit, fused it, and our minds were exchanged. And that's a quote from Egon Spengler, who is, without a doubt, the smartest of all of the Ghostbusters. So, in this particular episode, Egon and Slimer trade minds, right? And Slimer is normally just a little goofbag who wants to eat and cause problems. He's essentially the intellectual equivalent of a child, let's be real. So, the artwork here is a lot of fun. If you take a look in the background, you can see the house has slime all over it from Slimer just doing his goofy nonsense normally. But in the foreground, we have the intellectual Egon Slimer, where he's sitting there reading a book on spirits, right? So you've got a ghost reading a book on ghosts, and obviously his mannerisms completely change into being Egon as well. So the idea of this being a careful study works overall. The card Careful Study itself isn't that exciting, but the way that this all ties together flavor-wise makes this a lot of fun. After that, we've got Total Containment Failures. So this is a reskin of Living End, which is a pretty good choice for what's going on here. So you can see that it counts as a black card from the little black dot down here beside sorcery. That's what they do when cards don't have casting costs up here, in case you've never seen a card like this. So it has Suspend, 2 black and 2, and it suspends for 3, which means when you pay the suspend cost, you exile it with 3 counters on it. During each of your upkeeps, you remove a counter from it. When the last counter comes off, that's when you get to cast this spell. And when you do cast it, it says each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, then puts all cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. So essentially, this is Living Death, but they redid it for the time spiral block as a suspend concept, which was a fun historical nod. So they've brought it back here, and it works under the idea of a containment failure. I really like the flavor text as well. It says, I've only heard it once before, but that sounds like a containment unit exploding. And that is from Ray, right? So we get quotes from a number of different Ghostbusters this time around, which is a lot of fun. And the artwork shows what is clearly a bunch of ghosts escaping from the containment unit. If you think about it, basically the way this works is it'll bring back everybody who's gone and get rid of everybody who's around. Now, on one level, the television show never showed the entire city being wiped out because obviously this is for kids, right? So we're not going to see the actual death and destruction that this entails, where if you really go by what the card's saying, all the ghosts would get loose and then everybody's done for. But that's not really how they're going to depict things in a child's cartoon, right? We're not dealing with the old scarring original Transformers movie where they just start blowing up Transformers and you're like, but nobody ever gets hurt, and all of a sudden all your heroes are getting obliterated, which is just insane to me. So obviously a lighter tone, but Living End is a very interesting choice, and it certainly does have a nice flavor overlap. The ghosts all whipping out of the building. These are the scarier ghosts, right? Slimer is your goofy little friend ghost, and actually at a certain point they turned the Ghostbuster show into Slimer and the Ghostbusters, right? And I think that was near the end of it though. Anyways, let's move on to the next card. We've got Answer the Call. This is Ella Damry's call. 1 white, 1 green for an instant. Search your library for a creature card. Reveal that card. Put it into your hand. Then shuffle. The flavor text says, don't cross the streams, which is not attributed to anybody at all for some reason. I have no idea why. They're not all yelling it out. But anyways, that is a weird choice. None of the other cards that have quotations end up just leaving them unattributed. But you can see all of the Ghostbusters here. You've got Ray, Peter, Egon, Winston, who I somehow failed to mention the last time when we were talking about, wait a minute, what is this? I got a little thing hanging off my hat. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So I failed to mention Winston in the previous Ghostbusters video, which some people were kind and said, yo, he didn't think about it because they didn't quote Winston on any of the cards. There were no references to him. But at the end of the day, Winston is an awesome Ghostbuster. I like his vibe of if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you tell me to, right? Like Winston is a lot of fun. And actually, speaking of Winston, apparently the dude who played Winston in the original movie, he actually applied, he went in and did an audition to be the voice for Winston, but instead of choosing him, they chose Arsenio Hall, probably because Arsenio Hall was much more famous. But I mean, when you can have the original Ghostbuster voice, why would you not want it, right? Ernie got hosed on that one. Also, apparently, one of the voices was done by a dude from Full House. The voice for Peter Venkman was Uncle Joey? Cut it out guy. Do you know what I'm talking about? Man, I feel a million years old thinking about this. But this whole bring any creature you want out, get everybody together, answer the call. You can see even Janine is there in her little Ghostbuster outfit. She gets her own pink outfit. Back in the day, they started making changes to the show where they took the original Janine where she was acerbic, right? Like for real, she had a massive attitude to her. And as the show progressed, they started to soften her and try and make her more feminine, right? They tried to basically change up the vibe. They were working with consulting companies, and that caused them to make shifts to different characters, some of which really didn't add that much to the show, right? And Slimer was pushed more to the forefront as well. So Ella Damry's call is, it's solid. It's a tutor, right? It's 1 green and 1 to grab any creature you want, slap it straight into your hand. That card actually came out all the way back in the days of Plane Shift, which would be over 20 years ago. But its power level holds up. An instant tutor that can get you any creature, boom, no problems with that, right? And the artwork is just solid. You have the Ghostbusters standing there. They're blasting their proton beams. Let's go, right? I like it. Moving on. we've got the Ghostbusters patch. So they're literally talking about here on the shoulder. And again, this is just super, super iconic, right? This is one of the most iconic things about the Ghostbusters, their little anti-ghost logo. And I love how the ghost is like, oh no, like it's not a menacing ghost. It's a goofy little bag ghost. And he looks just kind of, he's like, oh no, I got caught stealing cookies kind of vibe, right? So Ghostbusters patch is Boros Charm. 1 white, 1 red for an instant. Choose one. Deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalkers. Permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. This one for me, it's a little bit harder to fit the flavor of this to the actual game mechanics. You know what I mean? Like, the Ghostbusters patch dealing the damage, we can just assume it's the Ghostbuster who's wearing it. So you're only going to have the patch there if you have a Ghostbuster there, right? And clearly, with their anti-ghost technology, they're going to be able to do the damage. So that part works out pretty well. Permanents you control gaining indestructible. It's kind of a stretch, but you can say the Ghostbusters are there and they're going to protect everybody and everything. But let's be real, tends to be damage done to the environment and stuff like that when they're around because the ghosts are erratic. The ghosts are doing damage and the Ghostbusters are trying to keep them contained. But that doesn't mean buildings and other stuff around aren't going to be getting damaged. So it's a little bit in the middle flavor-wise. And then the double strike, that one, maybe it's 2 Ghostbusters together, both firing, or maybe it's crossing the streams, right? I mean, right? Overall, I like the fact that they have a card referencing the patch. I like the artwork where you can see this weird tiki totem demon ghost thing. I do not remember at all what this ghost is about or this particular moment in the series, but ultimately, Boros Charm is a solid card, so it's not a terrible one to end up in a secret lair. The card choices they've made for this so far aren't too shabby, but Ghostbusters patch is visually enjoyable. Of course, I'm looking at it through nostalgia glasses, so let's be real. And then we've got Ecto 1. Now this is super exciting. Ecto 1 is mega ultra iconic of the Ghostbusters. Just looking at it, I can hear that distinct siren noise that it has. I can't replicate it myself properly. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I ain't doing a good job. But it's ringing in my head just looking at it. And not only do you get the Ecto 1 with this, but you also get the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, who looks so happy. He's having his best day. It almost looks like he's just waving, hey Ghostbusters, it's fun to be doing something together again. Ecto 1, get you some Ecto Cooler action. I wonder if they're ever going to reissue those. Anyways, this is a reskinned, unlicensed hearse from Capenna. And talk about amazing flavor just from the name, right? You've got a hearse, which is what they repurposed into the Ecto 1, and hearses are usually used to transport the dead, so it works perfectly as a Ghostbuster vehicle. And the unlicensed part of it, they were basically an unlicensed agency. They just set themselves up and were like, yo, we're Ghostbusters. We stop ghosts, but there's no government oversight. There's no laws pertaining to it because the government doesn't believe in ghosts or any of that nonsense, right? So I really like the fact that just even the name unlicensed hearse ties in so well to the Ghostbusters vibe. And then you've got what it actually does, right? It's a 2 casting cost vehicle artifact. Tap it, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Ecto 1's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards exiled with it. Crew 2. The flavor text says, no eating in the car, and that's from Winston. So you get some Winston. Winston is way more represented in this secret lair when he was absent from the first secret lair. And in terms of the way the flavor plays out, this adds up. Tapping to exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard, that can represent the ghosts. So you show up and you can capture a ghost or 2. The power and toughness being equal to the number of cards exiled with it, the more ghosts you catch, the more your prestige increases. The more the city knows who you are, trusts who you are, and basically, okay, you're gaining in strength in a way, reputationally. So it is a bit of a stretch, but it does actually fit from a flavor perspective. And like I said, the artwork on this is fantastic. Watching the Ecto roaring in, and also take a look at the way that they've done the artwork. You can see the Ecto has literally just whipped around a corner at high velocity. The lights that are trailing after it, the blue and red, have these trails whoop, whoop, that are curving around, and the car itself is literally unbalanced from how fast it's whipping around. So you have the one side that's down, but the wheels on the other side are lifted up. And then the little details like the Ecto 1 license plate, the Ghostbusters logo on the back, and then in the distance, it's racing towards a city on fire with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man just going to town. So this is mega epic. Now, the bonus card, we don't actually have the artwork to look at, but it's been revealed that it is Ghost Trap, right? So I'm going to be curious to see. I mean, we know how it's going to look, but at the same time, I still want to see it. So that wraps up the Ghostbusters Secret Lair and this video. Just a reminder, I did put out that movie review video today talking about 3 different horror movies, including the terrible movie Longlegs. So I will leave a link down in the comment section if you want to go and check that out. And I will be live streaming tonight over on my other channel. There will also be a link for that down in the pinned comment. So thanks for coming by, my friends. Big shout out to my patrons for supporting my channel. You guys rule, and I will see you all in the next video.